Bet. And we had just seen that this debate was told over differently between Naharda and Surah. In Surah, Rav's yeshiva, the students were saying that both Rav and Shmuel make a distinction between whether the pasuk schach is on the side or in the middle. On the side, it's 4 amot to be a problem because otherwise you would bend the wall, dofen akuma. In the middle, it is 4 tfachim that separates the two halves of the sukkah. As we discussed with Tosfos, it doesn't like invalidate the whole sukkah in one fell swoop. What it does is it cuts the schach in half, and therefore sometimes you'll be left with 2 puzzle sukkahs, sometimes you'll be left with 1 kosher and 1 puzzle. But 4 tfachim create the problem, divide the schach. That's if it's in the middle. This is in opposition to the position of Rabbi, and Rabbi says even in the middle it's 4 amot. And that's Rabbi's position. But again, according to in Surah, the version was that both Rav and Shmuel made this difference between the side and the middle. In Naharda, Shmuel's yeshiva, they said actually this was a debate between Rav and Shmuel. Shmuel was the one with the difference between on the side and in the middle. 4 amot on the side, then wall, middle 4 tfachim. Creates a separate space, divides it by a different space, and divides the schach into 2. That's Shmuel's position, and Rav says whether the middle, whether the side, 4 amot. And as we have seen in 1 or 2 other places in this Masechet, here too, although we normally rule like Rav, we are going to rule like Shmuel. I don't think anybody ever imagined that they could have up to 4 amot of pasuk schach in the middle of their sukkah. So we actually do wind up ruling like Shmuel, which is quite fascinating. Again, at least that's according to the Nahardav version, where this is a debate between Rav and Shmuel. According to the Surah version, we're ruling like the consensus opinion of Rav and Shmuel, who make this distinction between on the side and in the middle. Question.
You said we have the puzzle stop right down the middle. You do that with the kosher puzzle sukkah,
yeah.
2 puzzles.
Yeah.
Why couldn't you have 2 koshers?
If you had, thank you, that's a good point. If you had 4 walls, that is absolutely correct. The Gemara is always assuming a 3-wall sukkah, and you are absolutely correct if you have a 4-wall sukkah, right? And you have your kosher stach here, right? And your puzzle stach here. And then your kosher schach here, you're left with 2 separate sukkahs, each one with 3 walls. You are absolutely correct. The Gemara is just assuming a 3-wall sukkah. With a 4-wall sukkah, it would divide it into 2 separate kosher ones, and then you just couldn't obviously sit in the middle. Okay. So now let's take a look, but now we're within the Surah version, that the Narda version, that this is the debate of Rav and Shmuel.
No, exactly.
We are, good question, about to tell you, where it says Tnan. It is about 20 lines from the bottom, right by, there's an asterisk, okay? It says Be'emsa ba'ar ba'amot, okay?
Can I make a public service announcement?
Please.
Rivka is home.
Oh, good.
But she's not receiving visitors yet.
Okay.
I got those
Rep.
statements.
Stephen asked me to cite.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Actually, let's start 4 lines above that. B'Naharda Masnu, the line starting with Masnu. In Naharda, here was the version. Amar Rav Yud Amar Shmuel, Schach be'emsa posel ba'ar ba'a. In the middle 4 tfachim. Is it now what Shmuel's saying? Minatzad posel ba'ar ba'amot, on the side 4 amot. Rav Amar, and Rav says, according to Shmuel's yeshiva, Rav disagrees. Bein minatzad u'bein be'emsa ba'ar ba'amot. It's always 4 amot. It's not now, as opposed to yesterday where we tried to figure this out by logical arguments. Here, we're going to try to use textual proofs to prove one side or the other. It's not. The Mishnah says. Now we're going to revisit Mishnah that we saw before, that we had sort of been implicitly interpreting a little bit according to this debate. Now we're going to actually see how the variant interpretations based on which side you adopt. If you put on the sukkah a plank that is 4 tfachim wide, it's kosher. Okay, the sukkah remains kosher, even though the plank, this is according to the position that Rabbi Meir, or maybe Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, that these types of planks are puzzle. But the Mishnah is telling you, even though the plank is puzzle, the sukkah remains a kosher sukkah. So how does that work? So according to Rav, it works just fine. He said that pasuk schach, whether on the side or the middle, requires 4 amot. So the sukkah is kosher. You wouldn't be able to sit under the pasuk schach. Once it's 4 tfachim, it's significant. And that, if you remember, that's what the Mishnah said. Ve'ein yeshenim tachtav, right? The sukkah is kosher, but don't eat or sleep under it. fine. Don't eat or sleep under it, but it doesn't affect the kashrus of the sukkah because you need 4 amot. 4 tefachim won't affect the kashrus. That works beautifully according to Rav. El Shmuel the Amar be'emsa ba'arba'ah. But Shmuel says that once it's in the middle, 4 tefachim actually invalidates the sukkah, cuts the sukkah in half. Amai kshera. Why does the Mishnah say that the sukkah remains kosher? So the Gemara says, what are we talking about? Minatzad. When the Mishnah says you can put up a plank and the sukkah remains kosher, it doesn't mean in the middle. It would mean when you put it up on the side, which it never says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah reads obviously much better according to Rav. The Mishnah says a 4 tefachim plank, which is puzzle, does not invalidate the sukkah. Rav says perfect. That's exactly what I've been saying all along. And Shmuel says we're talking about a case where it is on the side and it's because you are bending the wall. Okay, let's try again. Tashma. Okay, here we go again. And this is a breita. Again, you'll remember this was brought into the discussion earlier with the whole issue of planks. Shnei sadinim mitzarfim. Two sheets can combine. If you have a sheet that's, 3 tefachim wide and another sheet that's a tefach wide, they're both totally pasul schach, and you put them next to each other, then it's 4 tefachim of invalid schach, or 4 amot if that's what you need. But 2 sheets combine to create enough invalid schach. Shnei nesarim ein mitzarfim. 2 planks do not combine. Why? Because this is the opinion that planks are not really invalid schach, so therefore they don't combine. Okay? Or certainly planks less than 4 tefachim are not invalid. And therefore, there's no problem. Rabbi Meir Omer, Nisarim Kisadinim. Rabbi Meir, if you remember, who's the one that has the issue with planks, says no, planks are just like sheets, and therefore they would combine to give you enough pasul schach. Now, how is this going to work? Well, we have to figure out how big these planks are so we can understand, how much you're combining them to create. So if you remember, that was debated before. Are we debating planks? Is the debate of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda with planks between the size of 3 and 4? Or is the debate with planks the size of 4 and larger? People vaguely remember that debate? Okay, good. A few heads nodded. So let's try the 2 reads of this and see which ones work out. Now this is interesting. Since we're discussing a Rav and Shmuel debate here, we're going to test it according to what Rav said over there. So according to the approach that Rav said, I jumped ahead. According to the approach that Rav said, "Bein bemsa bein minatzad ba'arba amot, my mitzdarfim la'arba amos." I'm sorry. So what the Gemara isn't saying, but is implicit, is that Rav said the debate of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir about planks is only by 4 tefachim and larger planks. Okay, so here's the issue: you've got 2 planks. So you have 2 planks. And Rabbi Meir says mitzarfin, right? And Rabbi Yehuda says ein mitzarfin. Okay, to combine to the minimum size. Now, how big are these planks? So this is the debate of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, whether planks are a problem. If you'll remember, Rav said they are debating planks that are the size of 4 tefachim and bigger. Less than 4 tefachim, even Rabbi Meir doesn't have a problem. Okay, so the planks here are 4 tefachim, at least. So now, what does Rabbi Meir mean they combine? Why isn't 1 plank enough to create a problem? You already have 4 tefachim. But we're dealing according to Rav, who says this is the debate. But if the same Rav says that in the middle you need 4 amot, then we know what it means to combine. Combine enough planks so that you have 4 amot. So that's what the Gemara says. Let's take a look. It's good according to that approach, the Amarav Bein Bemsa Bein Minatzad Ba'arba Mot, that Rav says the approach of Naharda, that according to Rav in the middle also needs 4 amot to be a problem. My mitzdarfin. So why would you need to combine the planks since we're talking about 4 tefach planks? Mitzdarfin labra amot. You combine so many planks that you have 4 amot because you need 4 amot to invalidate the sukkah. But according to the version in Surah where Rav says that even in the middle is 4 tefachim, and the same Rav says that we're discussing planks of 4 tefachim, according to that approach, who needs to combine? 1 plank invalidates the sukkah. Hey Chidami, what's the case? If it's 4 tefachim wide, Lama who leads to
That's
Rufe?
right.
It's Rufe who needs to combine. It itself invalidates. Either less behu arba if it doesn't have four. Kanya be'almaninu. It's just a stick. That's according to Rav, who himself says that they don't debate less than four. Less than four, everybody says it's just a stick. It doesn't even count as a plank. So the Gemara says la'olam the isbehu arba'a. Fine. They're four tfachim. Obviously, they have to be because according to Rav, that's what they're debating. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Umay mitzdarfin. So why would you need to combine them? Mitzdarfin labra almost minatzad, because we're talking that the plank is not in the middle. If the plank is in the middle, then according to this version of Rav, four tfachim already invalidates the sukkah. But we're talking that the planks are at the edge of the sukkah, and if they're at the edge of the sukkah, whatever, you get the idea. Anyway, if they're at the edge of the sukkah, only once it is 4 amot will it invalidate. Any less than that, we will bend the wall. Okay? So what have we done now? We've brought a Mishnah and a Breita, which seem to say, the Mishnah seems to say 4 tfachim is enough to create a problem. And, both of them. The Mishnah said that 4 tfachim itself does not create a problem, a proof that you need more than 4 tfachim. And the answer is no, we're talking about at the side of the sukkah. The Breita also implicitly says 4 tfachim is not enough to create a problem. You need to combine them. And we have the same answer. That's because we'll say that the case is we're talking at the side of the sukkah. So any scenario you bring me that shows that 4 tfachim is not a problem and would seem to support an idea that you need 4 amot in the middle, I'll tell you that's a scenario that's talking on the side. And that's why it's not a problem. So that's how we're going to get out of those Breitas and Mishnahs that seem to prove Rav's position that you need 4 amot in the middle. Because anything that seems to say that will say we're talking not in the middle, but on the side. Yes.
Question about Min Hatzad. Can you combine both Gud Asik and Dofen Akuma?
No. Because the whole idea is that you need the physical continuation of the wall. No, that's an interesting question. You can't have a non-wall at the beginning part of the roof. Can you have a mechitza down here, do a good asik, and then use the bend? I think you are able to do that.
But not at the top.
There's not at the top. Not at the top. I think there's a Ron about that. I'll double check that. I think you are able to do that. Okay, so that's how we got out of those proofs that seem to say 4 tfachim does not invalidate. That we're talking about the side. Tashma. Let's try again. Sicha b'nisarim shel eretz. You put cedar planks on your sukkah. Sheyesh ben arba. Then they're 4 tfachim wide. Divya kol psula. Everybody would agree it's invalid. This is the Breita that supports the idea that the debate of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is only between 3 and 4. Once it's 4 tfachim, everybody agrees it's invalid. Okay, so that's what it's saying. If it's 4 tfachim, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree it's invalid. Ein behen arba. If it's not 4 tfachim, it's between 3 and 4. That's the debate of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir posts of Rabbi Yehuda Machir. Okay, that's what we've seen before. A debate of with the planks here being framed as between 3 and 4. But now becomes the interesting line for us. Top of Yud Chedem Aleph. Umoda Rabbi Meir will concede, she'im yesh bein neser leneser kamale neser, if between a plank and a plank there is the gap of a plank, and sheminiach psal, again, so interesting that the kosher schach is called psal. You put the kosher schach beinehem uchshera, and it's kosher. Okay, so you have these sukkah made of these planks, which are between 3 and 4. So, or actually, we're going to assume here 4. Okay, we'll see, because the debate of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is between 3 and 4, but everybody agrees it's invalid with 4 tfachim. So you have these things which have, that doesn't look like a plank. That looks psal. You have these planks which are 4 tfachim wide, okay, and there are gaps here between them. Okay, these are each 4 tfachim wide. Even Rabbi Yehuda says that they're pasul. But even Rabbi Meir, who's more strict, will say that if you come and you fill this with kosher schach, and this is also 4 tfachim, then it's kosher. Now, how the heck could that be? How did your sukkah become kosher? I mean, you've got all this pasul schach breaking it up, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you say that you normally need, 4 amot to invalidate your sukkah, you don't have 4 amot of pasul schach. So obviously, don't sit under the pasul edges, but the sukkah itself can be kosher with zones you can eat in and zones you can't. Fine, but at least it doesn't invalidate the sukkah. It's just a sukkah with, like I said, different zones. But if 4 tfachim invalidates, How does this solve the problem? Okay, so let's take a look.
I think it's amazing. 4 tvachim is so wide.
I know, even 4 tvachim is a foot. No, it's more like a foot. Okay, anyway. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. So Bishlema, says the Gemara, Laman Amar Bein Vemsa Bein Netzad Ba'arba Amot. If even in the middle it doesn't invalidate the sukkah until you have 4 amot, Mishum Hachi Kshera. So the sukkah is kosher. Yes, don't sleep or don't eat under the 4 tfachim puzzle. 4 tfachim puzzle marks out a big enough zone. If it's less than 4 tfachim, by the way, you could even eat under the stach. But 4 tfachim under the puzzle stach. But 4 tfachim marks out a big enough zone that it's its own space and don't eat under it. Fine, but the sukkah remains kosher, just with different zones. But if in the middle, if 4 tfachim is enough to invalidate the sukkah, Amai Kshera, how does doing this alternating make the sukkah kosher? Every single plank should invalidate the sukkah. So the Gemara now here we it's like a gotcha, because every time the Gemara until now has been trying to prove that 4 tvachim doesn't invalidate, we've said, oh, what are we talking about? When it says that 4 tvachim is a problem, we're talking minatzad. But you can't do it here, because here it says you're alternating the whole roof. Oh, we're just talking on the side. What do you mean? We're alternating the whole roof. But guess what? The Gemara is going to figure out how we're going to turn this into a case where it's minatzad. Let's see how. So the Gemara says like this. Amar Rav Huna Braid Rav Yoshua, says Rav Huna the son of Rav Yoshua, Hacha b'sukkah de lo havye el shmona mitzamot askinan. The sukkah is only exactly 8 tfachim, 8 amot. Excuse me, 8 amot. The yayiv neser psal v'neser psal v'neser psal mehagisa. The neser psal v'neser psal v'neser psal mehagisa. Okay, that basically you've got a sukkah that is 8 amot wide. Okay, and what you do is you start alternating on this side up till here. You know, let's just imagine you've been alternating. This represents the whole length, and here this is your 4 amot mark when you get to the psal there. Okay, you've alternated all the way up to 4 amot on that side. Then you do the other side, but you don't keep on going. Okay, you start the same way on the other side. So way back here, you start the same way, right?
So in the middle, you get the same
when you
thing
get to the right.
sides.
So since you're starting the same way, when you get to the middle, right at the 4 amot mark, you have here 8 tfachim of kosher schach. But it's smack in the middle of the sukkah. But because each side here is less than 4 amot, right? Because it was 3 like 3 amot and 2 tfachim, and then you added the amot. So what you do is that lets you bend the wall here and bend the wall here and make it into a kosher sukkah in the middle, which means that we've turned this issue into minatzah.
Yeah.
We basically, every time we've proven 4 tfachim is not a problem, we said we're talking on the side. Look, it's not a problem, it's in the middle. No, it's really minatzah. You've really got this whole thing becoming your wall, and therefore, in the middle, you can get your kosher sukkah.
But we're doing dofen akuma over kosher schach.
Yes, that you can do. You can incorporate the kosher schach. Any puzzle schach within 4 amot of the wall, right, can be incorporated into the wall.
Could you remind us, was there a pasuk from which the Chacham learned dofen akuma?
No. There's all like halach l'moshe misina.
That's going to ask my next question.
Yeah.
Even though they don't say halach l'moshe misina.
Well, no, the Gemara actually did say that. The Gemara actually said at the bottom of Hey Amud Bet, it said, where was it? Yeah, one minute. Oh no, maybe the Vav Amud Bet. Hold on a minute. Yeah, the middle of Vav Amud Bet. The Gemara says, so what's the point about, that mechitzas halach l'moshe misinai? So it says, ki asay hilchasa l'gud v'lavud v'dofen akuma. Right, smack, like the top third of the Vav Amud Bet by the 2 dots. That the halach hilchasa, which normally is understood to mean halach l'moshe misinai, okay, which was sort of said before, is good and lavud and dofen akuma. All of these principles. Okay. Yeah, it is an important line. Okay, back to our Gemara. Okay, so now we've dealt with the textual evidence. Let's realize that all the textual evidence supports Rav. all the textual evidence supports the idea that 4 tfachim is not enough to invalidate the sukkah. And we've turned all of those cases into cases of minat tzad. Okay? So let's take a look. Amar Baye. Avia Shlosha, now we're moving on beyond this debate of 4 Amot and 4 Tfachim. The Gemara didn't clearly rule, but we rule even 4 Tfachim in the middle is the problem. Amar Baye, Avia Shlosha B'Sukkah Gdola, Umiyato, Bein B'Konim, Bein B'Shvudin, Have Miyat. B'Sukkah Ketana, okay, so you have air, 3 Tfachim, a gap of 3 Tfachim. We know that is a problem, right? That breaks up the Schach. So he said, fine, but let's say you shrunk the gap by filling in the air with some puzzle schach, whether it's kosher schach or puzzle schach. It doesn't matter. You've solved the problem, right? Understood? You have 3 tfachim, even if you put in a little puzzle schach. So you now have a tefach and a half of puzzle schach, a tefach and a half of air. You don't have enough of either. Good. You solved your problem. That's if it's sukkah gdola, a more than minimum size sukkah. But he says, wait a minute. Besukkah Ketana, if it's a minimum size sukkah, exactly 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim, b'kanim havei miyot. So if you fill the gap with kosher schach, you solve the problem. No kidding. Even if you didn't fill the gap, even if you just filled part of it, the rest you say lavud, so you solve the problem. B'shvudin lo havei miyot. But if you put puzzle schach there, it does not solve the problem. Okay. So now, why not? So, because this is what we saw before. You might remember yesterday, Abai assumed that in a small sukkah, the shear was 3 tfachim of pasol schach. 3 tfachim of air, 3 tfachim of pasol schach. That was Abai's assumption. Well, now we're hearing him spell it out, but he doesn't tell us why. But you have a sukkah that's exactly 7 by 7. Okay? And what he would say is, so if you have air that is 3 tfachim, right, here, then obviously it breaks it up. That's even in a big sukkah. But if you have in there pasol schach, Abai would say the following. He would say, look, I know that pasol schach normally doesn't break up the thing and isn't a problem until it's 4 tfachim, minimally. That's what we've been saying. But once it's 3 tfachim, at least it defines enough of its own space that you can't incorporate that space into the parameters of the sukkah. So this is like a brand new idea, not based on anything we saw before. I admit it does not break up the schach, but it says this is already enough of a segment that is its own zone, that it does not just get collapsed into the 2 other sides, that now you cannot say you've got a sukkah 7 by 7. Because now at least a piece of the sukkah cannot be considered incorporated as part of the size of the sukkah.
Isn't that the same as saying you can't sit underneath it? You can't sit underneath it?
No, because actually in a normal sukkah less than 4 tfachim you could sit underneath. So,
correct.
Yeah,
right.
So but he's not. This is only
he's
3.
Not saying that.
He's only 3. He's not saying about that. He's just saying it's a new idea he has. Again, that if you have to figure out what are the dimensions of my sukkah, so when you have such a small sukkah, you cannot incorporate that into the dimensions. I guess the idea is, like, if you get imagine something like this. This has a very loose analogy. Okay, you want to know how much what's called floor space you have in your apartment. You got a nice big apartment, so okay, you include like the bathroom floor space and the space taken up by the thickness of the walls. Do you include that or not? But imagine now you've got this tiny little studio Manhattan apartment, right? So you're so tiny that you can't count that little space as part of this floor space because it's not really, it's not like you already have living space you don't have to include it. Anyway, that's my loose analogy. Okay, but the point is, once it is so small, every space matters, and if you have even 3 tfachim, it cannot be incorporated into the dimensions of the sukkah. Fine, that was implicit before, and now he's saying it explicitly. The Gemara doesn't dwell on it. It's obviously a new idea of Abaye's. Okay, or the Abaye assumed that Rabbi agreed to it yesterday, if you'll remember. Okay, now the Gemara says like this. Now, Hani Mili Minatzad. This is not going on Abaye. When do we say lavud works? When have we been assuming lavud works? If it's at the edge of a sukkah, it's a gap between the wall and the schach, less than 3 tfachim, it's closed. He says, Avo be'emsa, the same way we were discussing how much schach invalidates in the middle, and the middle could be different than the edge, right? That was our whole discussion so far today. The Gemara is saying, let's have the same discussion by the gap of air. Maybe the gap of air, 3 tfachim works at the edge, but doesn't work in the middle. right? The same way we have a different problem in the middle by Pasol Schach, maybe we have a different problem in the middle by air.
Rabbi, Linzer, how did you know that the Hani Mili Min Hatzad
Because of
all the way back
Rashi.
to Lav?
Because of Rashi. It's very confusing.
I
Right,
would never, without
right.
looking at the
Because of
ability-
Rashi, he says we're now going back to the more general point.
Thank you.
As the Gemara continue, it could be part of a bite, but it's not because it's going to
No,
introduce
it's
a
not
new
smooth
debate.
at all.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, but you're right. Only because of Rashi, it is definitely a confusing transition. Okay. Aval be'emtza, if you have the gap of air in the middle, right? Maybe just like Pasol Schach was different in the middle. Maybe that's worse in terms of air. So that kliba Ravach of Ravina. That's the debate of Ravach and Ravina. Chad Amar one says yesh lavud be'emtza, that there is lavud in the middle. Why not? Right? Lavud is a principle we always apply. So any less than 3 tefachim, wherever it occurs, side, middle, who cares? We close the gap. The Chad Amar, but one says ein lavud be'emtza. Nope, in the middle of a roof you cannot say lavud, which is crazy, right? We never have heard any limits of lavud. We say lavud all the time. So Tosfos, by the way, I should say, is sensitive to this. Like he says, what do you mean? We got like classic lavoods where you make a virtual wall out of like sticks that are 3 tefachim, from one another. That's all this middle space. It's not just edge space. So Tosfos says, no, we're talking about roofs. For some reason, we know that in all the rest of the world, like when talking about like walls and things like that, you can say lavud whether it's the middle or the edges. But here's an opinion that for some reason, when it comes to a roof, you can only say lavud at the edge, not at the middle. So we're going to now bring proofs from Mishnayos and Breitos that deal with roofs that say whether you can say lavud even in the middle of a roof. Okay, for some reason, maybe the middle of a roof is different. So, right. In this, well, no. This is once it's 3 tefachim, it's no longer lavud. So we're not.
It has to be
less than 3. We're no longer in a bayit. Okay.
All I would say is that if you say, like maybe the machloket is a ceiling a wall flipped or not?
Yeah, but it's still Okay, let's take a look. So the word says like this. So yesh lav chadamar yesh lavud b'emsa v'chadamar ein lavud b'emsa. My time in the mandar on yesh lavud b'emsa. What's the reason that you say lavud applies even in the middle of a ceiling? Titani with on brisa. Kora yotze mikoto zeh. Let's say you have a beam. This is for the halachas of Shabbos, like a courtyard, right? That has 3 walls, and you need, in order to carry in it, either a post at the entranceway or a beam across the entranceway for the 4th side. Right? People know that principle, lechi or kora. So you've got a beam. The beam doesn't get to the opposite wall. Or if you have 2 beams, one coming out of one wall, one coming out of the other wall, and they meet in the middle, but they don't touch. Sort of like when they were building the tunnel, and that was also the Chizkiyahu's tunnel, right? That's like amazing, It halved the time it took to build it, but the need of precision in order to be able to come from both ends and get in the middle, that they did it in modern technology is not such a chiddush, but they did it even in Chizkiyahu's tunnel. Anyway, okay, so they meet in the middle and they don't touch. So if the gap between the korah and the wall, or between the 2 korot, is less than 3 tefachim, you don't need to fill in the gap. Shlosha, once it's 3 tefachim, you have to fill it in with another korah. So what does it show you? It shows you say lavud, you treat it as connected, whether you're connecting it to the opposite wall or whether you're connecting 2 korot in the middle. Bemtza, you can connect, and that's more like an idea of a roof because it's something that's above. Okay, which is funny because there's an opinion that says korah is mishum mechitza. The way the korah functions by being this beam up there is that it sort of creates a virtual wall beneath it. So even though its function is to be a mechitza, since sort of geographically, it is about something that's running vertical and not something that's running horizontal, that we think that it might have different laws of lavud. And he says, look, you see, it doesn't have different laws of lavud. You can say it. The idach. So what would the other opinion say back? Shani koras to rabbanan. Yeah, that's all rabbinic. The need for a korah. Once you already have 3 walls. Here we're talking about a biblical idea, requirement, a requirement of sukkah. That's different. That you won't get away with lavud. So the Gemara says, "My time of demanda amar ain lavud b'emsa." Now, what's the basis of saying there isn't lavud b'emsa? Like that's bizarre. We never hear the idea that you can't say lavud. So we taught in a Mishnah by Tuman Tara, and by the idea of a oel mace, right? A corpse and a body under a roof. The roof conveys the tumah and stops the tumah from going above it. So aruba shebebayit. You have a skylight in your house. Skylight is obviously in the middle of the roof. Uba poteach tefach. And there is a tefach, it's a tefach by a tefach wide. Tuma bebayit, kulo tameh. If there's tuma in the house, then the house itself is fully tameh. Masha keneged aruba tahor. What's opposite the skylight remains tahor. Okay, because basically what you've got is, right, here's your roof, here's your skylight, there's the tefach, and you've got your tuma somewhere in the house. You've got your tuma over here. So what happens to the tumah? It spreads throughout the house, right? It goes under the roof, as it were, and the roof determines the area which it spreads, but it's not going to spread in that zone, that column created by the skylight, because there's no roof over that column. So everything in the house is tameh, except, actually use another color, okay, except the zone created right by the skylight, because there's no roof in that zone, so that if the tumah doesn't get communicated to the zone directly beneath the skylight. So if you have some vessel directly beneath the skylight, it is tahor. Okay, clear? Yep. Okay. So tuma keneged aruba. Let's say you've got the tuma underneath the skylight. So masha keneged tuma keneged aruba. Kol ba'is kulo tahor. Then the house is saved because there's no roof to bring it to the rest of the house. Okay? And now, what would happen though is if it were here, is that somebody above the aruba would get tameh because there's also no roof to block it. Okay? But if it's in this zone, then it doesn't have a roof, and the rest of the bayit remains tahor. Okay. Now, ein baruba poteach tefach. Let's say the skylight doesn't have a tefach. So in that case, tuma bebayit, if there's tuma in the house, keneged aruba tahor. Opposite the skylight remains tahor. Tuma keneged aruba, if there's tuma in the sky, underneath the skylight, kol habayit kulo tahor. The rest of the house remains tahor. Do you see any difference between the second one, the halacha of the second and the first? It's the exact same halacha. So Rashi acknowledges that, and he says the only reason it's describing two cases, one of a tefach and one less than a tefach, is because there are other halachas in which they're different, which is it's in the Mishnah where it appears. Okay, so the Mishnah goes into saying these ways it's the same, but there's other distinctions between that is made by the size of the aruba. Okay, but for this halacha, it's identical. However big the aruba is, it creates a zone underneath it, and if the tumah is here, that zone is saved. If the tumah is in the zone, then the rest of the house is saved. Whether it's a tefach or not a tefach, that is not a difference.
That's
now,
what you said, safe regard saying key ratio.
Yeah. The end of it is exactly the end is exactly the same as the beginning, exact same halacha, but fine. The difference is in another area. Now, what's his point? His point is, if we would say lavud be'emsa, what should you say in this case? What should you say in the case of the skylight? If you have a one tefach skylight and you normally say lavud, what should you say? Does the skylight create a safe zone underneath it? No, you should see it as closed. How can it be? In the laws of Tumah, you can have a hole in your roof, and it's a significant hole, and it creates a zone. It should be just insignificant. It should lose its identity based on lavud. So that's the reason I think that holes in roofs are different. So the Gemara says, the other one would say back, no. Shani Hilchos Tuma,
Right.
Yeah, that's its own category. The Hachi Gemirilu, that's a particular tradition they have. So that's a category of Tuma. You don't go applying laws of Tuma to other areas. You want to generalize that case. I'm saying that case is an exception, and the general rule is the rule that lavud you always say.
Right. For physical entities, it's closed, and for metaphysical entities, it's open.
Okay, say it that way. Now, Darish Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai. Now, Rabbi Yehuda the Rabbi Lai expounded in the following way: Bayis shenifchas v'sichech al gabav ksheira. So you had a house. This is going back to a simple case of a bending wall. Now the bending wall is a simple case. Goes back to a simple case of a bending wall. A little section in the middle of the roof fell out, and you filled it with kosher schach. Ksheira, it's kosher. Now the word darash is funny, right? Why doesn't it say I'm a Rabbi Yehuda, I'm a Rabbi Lai, blah blah blah? Because we're going to see that there was an exchange that took place. So he apparently was somewhere like in public giving a lecture. Okay, it's not like a drasha, like we're going to have an interpretation of a pasuk from the parsha. But he was somewhere giving a public lecture and teaching this to people. It was Erev Sukkos, and he said, if you got a hole in the middle of your roof and you put schach on it, it's still kosher. Okay, that's what he said in his drasha. Amar lefan of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi, said, Rabbi, Parish, Rabbi, you should explain what you're saying. You can't just say it's kosher. Kach bir Shabba. Here's how my father explained the case. Rabbi Yossi, Arba mos psula. If it's 4 amot, if the schach in the middle of your roof is 4 amot removed from the wall, then it's invalid. You can't bend the wall that far. Less than that, it's valid. Don't just say it's kosher. You're giving a public lecture. You got to explain what you're saying. It's kosher if there's less than 4 amot from this schach in the middle of the house, of the roof, to the wall. Okay, now we have another case. Darsh Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai. So Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai got up and he expounded, like in public, the following thing. Avruma sharia. Avruma, which is a type of a fish, is permissible. And apparently there was a question, nowadays we go crazy about all the stuff around bugs, and, is this like a recent invention or not? Take a look at Rashi, 2 lines down, and the wide lines of Ruma. Rashi says, Min dagim ktanim, ve'ein shratzim nikarim behem. Okay, it is a small fish, and tiny little bugs might get embedded in the skin of the fish, and they're not so obvious. Okay, so this is the question. Can you eat this avruma or not? You have to be concerned yourself about tiny bugs that you might not be paying attention to.
It's just disgusting.
Okay. All right, so he says it's permissible. Amar lefan of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi was there, and he said, Rabbi, Parish, Rabbi, explain what you're saying. You have to qualify it. Kachamar Abba, here's what my father said. Shemakom ploni asura, the fish of place X, he obviously said what the X was, is forbidden. Shemakom ploni muteres, case Y, the fish in place Y is permissible. You can't just say it's permissible. You got to say what situation you're talking about. So now, what's the explanation of the different places? He had Rabbi, like Rabbi said, had Sachanta, this Sachanta, which is another type of a fish, okay, the Bav Nahara, in the river Bav, that was the name of the river, Sharia are permissible. My time, and you don't have to worry about the little parasites that might be in it, like little bugs that might be in it. My time, what's the reason? If it's because that river, the water is rushing, the high dog tameh, and it's calling the concern of these embedded bugs or shratzim as a tameh fish, meaning it's a tameh thing that grows in the water. Okay, and these tameh bugs, kiva the leis luhu chut hashidra, since they don't have a spine, lo matzi kaim, they can't survive in rushing water. Okay, that's an interesting idea. Spine gives you some backbone. These fish that don't have a spine, it's the opposite. You think you don't have a spine, you're more flexible. It's easier. Anyway,
what doesn't have the spine?
The shratzim, the bugs. Okay. But it's being called here dag tameh, and that's why you don't have to worry about them. The hakachazina and the kai. But we actually see that these types of bugs exist in rushing water. By the way, quite fascinating that the Gemara is actually, bringing empirical evidence, right? Very often it will debate certain things based on, about the real world, based on psukim or based on other things, and it's interesting when it actually says, let's look at the empirical evidence.
Oh, so isn't the visibility of the bugs
yeah, but the Gemara isn't dealing with that. The Gemara isn't dealing with issues of visibility. Okay. That's a question for practical halacha. That's not what the Gemara is addressing. Okay, so the Gemara says, "Ela mishum de lo I'm sorry, skip line. So vada el mishum de maliche mai. Maybe it's because the water it's salty. The high dag tamei and this shrutzim that you're concerned with, even the leis le kilfi, since it does not have scales, lo matzikai maybe can't survive the harsh conditions of salty water. But that's not true. We see that they live in salty water. It must just be that the mud of that river does not literally like grow these treif fish. So again, it's a little funny. After the empirical evidence, it says the mud doesn't grow treif fish. Okay, but maybe fish actually grow because the eggs, right, are planted. So maybe it's saying it can't sustain the birthing of treif fish. Okay, of these treif fish. So in this river, you don't have to worry about it because basically it's a way of saying these bugs are not present in this river. It's like saying, oh, you can't drink the New York City water, that has the copepods, but the Riverdale water, that you can drink because that's a different source of water, and therefore you don't have to worry about the bugs. Okay? So, Amar Ravina, so says Ravina, Va'idna, nowadays, the Shafchi Nahar Eitan v'Nahar Gamda lahasam, that other rivers now have somehow diverted and empty into this river that was not a problem, but now they're getting fish from other rivers. So nowadays, Asira, everything is forbidden. Okay, so that was a fascinating little digression, but again, it was a case where Rabbi Yehuda was giving a public lecture, and Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi was saying you can't just say mutter. You have to be a little bit more clear what parameters you're talking about. Now, Itmar, it was taught. You put schach on a achsadra, on a portico that has ptzinim, which are like posts. Okay, so you've got your nice little yard, right? As Rashi says, your cloister. You've got your yard. Okay, it's got buildings back here. Okay, and it's got a portico that sort of runs along with this. It's got like a roof that runs like whatever. Okay, and it's got this, and maybe it's got these columns that are holding it up. Okay, you sort of get the idea? Okay, so these are the patsimim. If it's got not just the back wall, which is the house, but it has columns, right, towards where you want to put your sukkah, because you want to put your sukkah here, okay? Right? That's what you want to do. Okay, now the question here is, let's assume that this is like more than 4 amot or whatever. You can't use the wall. So let's assume there are no walls back there. You can't bend the walls to use it. Okay? Can you use the columns here to give you your kosher sukkah? So it says like this. Okay.
Wait, there's more than
4 amot.
There's more than 4 amot.
Yeah, let's say
overhang.
Let's say this is 5 amot overhang. So you
Right.
cannot bend the walls. But what you want to do is you want to use the colonnade. You want to use the sticks that are to be able to look at them as the wall. Okay, those are the ones that are closest to the schach.
Oh,
okay.
So the colonnade, the columns are not 5 amot.
No, the columns are right at the edge of the
They're
schach.
at the edge.
Right, the columns are right at the edge of the schach. Here's you walking on a little path.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so what? I have to erase it. Okay. So anyway, okay. Now, if it's got these colonnades, and those colonnades are with those columns or posts are within 3 tfachim of one another, that's the assumption that we're talking about, then that serves as a wall. Fine. But if it doesn't have posts that can be used, they're too distant from one another, whatever the situation is, the posts can't be used. Abayama kshera, it's still kosher. Rav Amar psula, it's puzzle. Now, how can it be kosher? Where are the walls? So Abai Amar Kshera, Abai says it's kosher. See, you thought we weren't going to finish the daf today. Amrina, Pi Tikra, Yored Visotain. This is a new idea. You thought we were done with Dofen Akuma and Gudasik and Lavud. No. What Abai is saying is like this. If you've got a roof that ends in a nice square way, okay, if that's the edge of your roof, okay, then this edge of the roof can be looked at as the beginning of a wall. Let's assume that there's some significant width there. It's like a tefach or something. And you can be, maybe not, but let's assume that. And that can be looked at as your wall, as the beginning of your wall. And you would say the edge of the roof goes down and closes off that area. Okay? So now you don't need, if you have just normal, let's say schach, it's little sticks, it's not squared off, you can't use that trick. Okay? But in this case, what did you do? Here you are walking underneath the portico, right? You know, etc., right? and you're putting schach this way, right? So use the edge of the beams of the portico to go down and to be considered like a wall. Okay, so that's like a really, wild idea. Until now, we've been thinking maybe you can do 10 tefachim at the bottom, and not maybe you can, and then it continues up. But to be able to use, when you have a squared off roof around it, the edge of the beams, and to say it goes down, that is the idea of pitikra yored v'sotei.
It's the opposite of dofen akuma. Instead of the wall going up and over,
Right, the wall
it's,
coming down.
Similar concept in air.
Yes, pitikra, good memory. Pitikra yored v'sotei is not just to sukkah idea, it's an area. A lot of these things are ideas, not the bending wall, because you don't need a rooftop by everything, but yes. Rava Amar, psula, it's invalid. Lo mina pitikra yored v'sotei, you don't say it. Now, there's a big debate, Rashi and Tosfos, which is what these huge Tososim are about, between how many walls do you need? Are we saying that you can use it for all 3 walls? That's what Rashi says, okay? But that's very hard to read the Gemara like Rashi. You should know that Rashi's opinion is that the one that says it's kosher says you can use it for all the walls. Tosfos says nobody is suggesting that. According to Tosfos, at most you can use this concept to give you your 3rd wall. So Tosfos wants to say that the scenario is you've built a wall here, and you've built a wall here, and you want to use it just to give you your 3rd wall. That's how Tosfos explains it. We're going to read the Gemara that way, okay? And that fits with the continuation. So let's take a look.
Would one think that the roof had to be at least 3 tefachim in width?
What? The roof? In order to say pitikra?
Yeah.
I'd have to check. I don't think
Should have to
so.
have some substance.
No. I think I have to check. I think that there's a position of a tefach, okay, but not 3. Certainly not 3 tefachim. Okay, but I need to check that. Okay, so the Gemara says like this: Amalei Rabbi Abaye. So Rabbi said to Abaye, "Lididachta Marta pitikra yod v'sotem." You say you can close it off. So if that's true, afilu hivchis dochen emtzai. What if the scenario was not these two walls you have, but let's say in a standard sukkah, which is assumed to have 3 walls, the back wall here is the one that connects the parallel ones, is called the middle wall. Okay, so Rava says if you're going to say pitikra yored v'sotem, would you say it even if you needed it to complete the wall, the back wall, right? If you didn't even start by connecting walls, would you say it even there? Okay, if your real walls were here, would you allow, the pitikra, basically, to close off that middle wall? Is that sort of clear what the scenario is? No. His case is, Abaye's, according to Tosfos. Okay, according to Tosfos, Abaye's case is, you built 2 walls. I don't know if this is clear. Maybe we need the square. Okay, you built your 2 walls, right? Okay, you built your real 2 walls. At the edge here, you have a portico, and you're going to use the portico to pitikra to create that virtual 3rd wall. That's what Abai says. So Rabbi says to him, okay, I hear that. I don't agree with it. I hear it. But what if you built 2 parallel walls, and you had here some type of a thing? Would you use that to create? Would you say your pitikra here to fill in the 3rd?
You say yes to the first one. Why can't you say yes?
Because
to that?
somehow he feels that that's like absurd. Because in the first case, you really have somehow like the real walls really define a type of an enclosed space. They don't fully enclose the space, but they define. We've had this idea. We've had this idea before. When you have a corner, you've closed off to some degree that space. So you want to be more lenient by the 3rd wall. I get it. But if you have this, you haven't created any sense of a closed space. Could you create an invisible 3rd wall there? So that's what he asks him. Let's see his answer. 1 minute. So Amalei, no. Modina l'cha bahi. Yeah, that's a good point. That case I'll concede. In that case, you're right. The real thing you start with is basically like a road, like a road that just has walls on the side. It's not like a space. It hasn't designated a space. It's just like walls on the side of a road. There, you can't say pitikra. When you start with a designated space, and you already are seeing this as a surrounded space, you can use pitikra there to create the 3rd
That's
wall.
what's calling it like a kumabui b'fulash.
When they're parallel. Right,
When they're parallel.
then it's like a road. It's not like a
So
space.
it's not.
So why wouldn't the portico roof be like a korah and the two walls be like a mavoi.
Because a car only works with a three-walled mabui, not a two-walled mabui. Okay? All right. So the Gemara says like this. Lema by Rava, bepluksa de Rav and Shmuel kamiflugi. Maybe Abai and Rava debate the debate of Rav and Shmuel. The Itmar was taught, achsadra bibika. Let's say you have this portico in a valley. And again, according to Tosfos, the assumption is you've built two walls. The reason it mentions a valley is because you otherwise couldn't carry in a valley. It's a carmelis. Okay, so you have, anyway, this portico. Again, Tosfos is reading into this sukkah that has two walls. Rav Amar, mutter l'talta bakula. You can carry in it. It's a good space. Damrina pitikra yard v'sote. V'shmuel Amar, ein tatlin ba ela barba mot. No, it's you can only carry, right, you're up to 4 amot. Damrina pitikra yard v'sote. Okay, it does not create a Rishus Yachid. So you see, this debate, you say Pitikra is the debate of Rav and Shmuel. Isn't that the same debate of Abai and Rava? So the Gemara says, Aliba de Shmuel, Kuleyamalo Pligi. According to Shmuel, who says that you don't say Pitikra of Yod V'Sotem, clearly, then, he's like the one who says you don't say it. He's like Rava, who doesn't say it by Sukkah, and he's not like Abaye. Keep ligi aliba de Rav. The question is whether Rav might concede the point, meaning Shmuel who says it's no good by Shabbos, by the carrying scenario, would also say it's no good by Sukkah. That's clear. The question is, would Rav possibly change his vote by Sukkah? Abai would say Rav goes like me. Rav says it works by Shabbos, it's going to work by Sukkah. The Rav Amar Lacha, and Rav would say to you, Ad kan lo Amar Rav Hosam el demchitzas lachsadehu davidi. There, Rav concedes it works, because there, if you have the case about having if you are, because what I didn't tell you is that achsada we're talking about is a covered portico. What you have done, this Shabbos case, not the Sukkah case, is you actually have built a rooftop on top of the achsadra. Okay, so it's actually a covered portico, a roof portico. And in that case, what you're trying to say, and let's say within that roofed portico, you have two kosher walls here. And what you're trying to say in that case of the roofed portico, and these are the beams, is let this come down and become the third wall. Okay, so it's a portico, yes, but it's like a roofed portico. Okay, so he says, you know what, this is better because here you start off with more real walls. Why do you start off with more real walls? Because in this case, you basically are building. The walls are being built, for the space below. Let's take a look. He says. Hasam de mechitzos lachsadrahu de avidi. Aval hacha de lav lahachi avidi lo. But here, right? He says here in this case, actually it's not these walls. Excuse me. In this case, the edge of the roof that is going to be your third wall, right? The edge of your roof in this case that's going to be your third wall. People sort of get what I'm drawing. Yes, that's a roof that is made to serve the achsadra. And therefore, it might be more legitimate to use the edge of that roof to create a wall. In this case, where are you getting the edge of your roof? You're getting it from outside the achsadra, right? You're getting it from the space over here that, whatever, right? Right? It's the rooftop outside the sukkah. So to use the edge of a roof that's from outside of the area you care about, to be that's the beginning of a wall of this space, no. If you want it to be the beginning of a wall of the space, it has to be from something that is made to serve the space. So therefore, even though here I say you can use it to close off the wall, I would not say it when the edge is on the outside, part of an outside roof, then it's not relevant to the space in the middle. Now again, you'll notice that our entire Gemara did not mention that you already had two walls. The simple Gemara made it sound like you could do it for all the walls. It didn't have any qualifications. But the reason that pushes Tosfos to say you have two walls, besides that he has other Gemaras he's dealing with, is because Rava says, Abai says, I'll concede the case when you only have two walls because then it's like a mabui mefulash. So, wait a minute. I thought that's what we were talking about. I thought we were talking about that it didn't have any walls, and you let it create all four walls. So, what does it mean that you're conceding the Mabui Mefulish case? So, because of that, Tosa says we have to assume all of the cases they're talking about already has two perpendicular walls, and then they're only debating using it for the extra walls. That makes it also a little bit more understandable what the idea of Pitikriot Visotem is, that it can complete a third wall once you already have the space designated. But again, that is not explicit in the Gemara. Okay.
Yasha Kol.
Except, except for this last case.